Welcome to another episode of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. A progressive and populist insight into Michigan's political and cultural world. And of course, an entertaining show on how to make Michigan's political machine work for the people, and not just the elite few. Now, from the Left of Lansing headquarters from his mid-Michigan attic, it's time for the award-winning Pat Johnston. It's all yours, Pat.
Yeah! Welcome to another edition of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. I am your host, Pat Johnston, and I don't mean to harp on this since I covered it last week, but I do think it is important, very, very important to highlight this fact as, the economy continues to crater for we, the working class. The K-shaped economy keeps growing and growing wider and wider, with the billionaire Epstein class getting richer and richer as they keep buying and buying and buying on Wall Street, while inflation, caused in part by dear leader Trump and Israel's war in Iran, is hurting the working class to no end. And as we've talked about here, dear leader originally said that he tore down the East Wing of the White House, the People's House, mind you, so that he could build a beautiful and exquisite ballroom where he could wine and dine and keep being the pedophile protector that he really is for the billionaire Epstein class. Now, dear leader said that the cost of the ballroom would be somewhere around $200 million originally, which was to be paid strictly by the corporate authoritarians who just wanted to suck up to the regime. And because, remember, as we've been told throughout our lives, government never creates jobs or wealth, unless, of course, you are part of the corporate authoritarian Epstein class. Sure, that's picking winners and losers, but that's really corporate welfare, and it's not really capitalism. But did you guys ever really believe the billionaire tech bros and oil executives are real capitalists anyways? No, they need us in order to survive. I guess that's what I've always found kind of ironic about those of us who are democratic socialists, since it always seems to me that we are the ones really pushing for fairness in the marketplace. Capitalism. But I digress. So, the ballroom was supposed to be around $200 million and paid for by private bribes. Donations. Then, dear leader doubled the cost months later, saying the price tag for this precious little ballroom would hover around $400 million. And it's funny, isn't it? It really is funny to me, at least, how there's just never enough money for public education or for paying teachers decent wages or providing Medicare for all or lowering prescription drug prices. But there's always enough money to benefit the Epstein class now, isn't there? Just funny how that works out. Anyway, the cost of the ballroom then rose to $400 million. But again, it was to be paid for by private corporate bribes. Stop it, Pat. I'm sorry. Donations. But then, Senate MAGA Republicans put a $1 billion amendment as part of its immigration bill, or the ICE funding bill, which would then go towards security enhancements for said ballroom. So, the ballroom that was supposedly to be paid for by billionaires looking to cozy up to the regime is now possibly going to be paid for by us, the working class in this country. I know, what a surprise. I really believed him at first. This week, dear leader spoke to the press, and just listen to how he responded to MS Now's Akela Gardner when she, lightly pressed him on how the cost of the ballroom has so far doubled. Listen.
We have a ballroom that's under budget. It's going up right here. I've doubled the size of it because we obviously need that. And we're right now on budget, under budget, and ahead of schedule. I doubled the size of it, you dumb person. Double the size.
Now, you heard dear leader Lyon say the ballroom is under budget, but when Akela Gardner said, okay, but is that because the price is doubled thanks to you? Dear leader called her a very dumb person because she correctly noted how the original price tag has, yes, doubled. But calling women dumb or piggy or saying that you can grab them wherever you want or being found liable for rape, it's kind of Trump's MO. And sadly enough, this country rewarded that kind of a guy with the presidency. Actually, twice. By the way, check out that video. You can find it anywhere, including on Left of Lansing's Patreon page, because he looks like, and I'm sorry, I know everybody's always joked about how he's the orange man, right? But just watch that. He really does look like a giant Oompa Loompa. Why don't you try just reading a book? And by the way, do you really think Donald Trump has ever read a book from beginning to end, unless it was Curious George or something like that? I don't think so. But I will say that I am amazed, or I was amazed watching that little, it wasn't a press conference, it was just a presser. He was outside. I was amazed that he was able to stay awake at that moment, since sleep is really the only thing he can do anymore. And yet nobody in the corporate press really covers how he continues to sleep during meetings, during his own cabinet meetings. And it's just boring to them. I bring this up, though, this whole thing with the ballroom, I bring this up again as a backdrop to what is happening in our economy. For instance, the Financial Times reports U.S. wholesale inflation jumped 6% in April, its highest level since 2022, in the latest sign of how President Trump's war in Iran has sent the costs of producing and transporting goods surging. Economists polled by Bloomberg expected a much softer April reading, but the increase was largely driven by a jump in fuel prices, which have surged since the Middle East conflict erupted in late February and pushed up costs for businesses across the world's biggest economy. And then there's this from the Financial Times. Economists said that data suggested that the war would continue to put upward pressure on prices across the economy as higher costs for industry fed through everything from groceries to airfares. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says the price of freight transportation increased 8.1% in April. And one economist told the Financial Times that it's going to be sometime before inflation peaks. Sometime. Wow. By the way, core producer inflation, which strips out the effect of food, energy, and trade services, was 4.4% in April, up from 3.7% in March. And then E.J. Antoni, an economist who Trump tapped to run the BLS last year before withdrawing the nomination, and who is now at the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, told the Financial Times that the core readings showed higher energy prices were bleeding into other parts of the economy. Even if gas and diesel prices have peaked at this point, most other prices, he says, will keep rising for months. Now, that wasn't from some leftist economist. That wasn't from yours truly, Pat Johnston. That's from someone who works with the Heritage Foundation. And let's not forget that for the first time in 3 years, inflation is erasing any wage gains working Americans are able to achieve. Now, I'm not alone in remembering how Dear Leader claimed endlessly during the 2024 campaign that he will bring costs down on day one. He promised that, but it was always a joke because we knew in order to bring costs down, he'd have to take on some corporate greed. And, well, you really think Trump was going to do that? I have to agree with our progressive Michigan podcasting friends from Head in the Office. The most astounding part of this cratering economy is how it is all self-inflicted. It didn't have to happen. Dear Leader Trump, for all of his bravado and for his high-heeled shoes and face paint, he is wilting under the right-wing Israeli government, which continues to push the United States into more war and for more debt in this war in Iran. And that's why I was beside myself when Michigan pollster Richard Zuba argued on WKAR's Off the Record a few weeks ago that Michiganders don't care about Israel and foreign affairs. They only care about affordability, he said. They only care about the high costs of their lives. They only care about the high cost of gasoline. Well, Michiganders are shelling out $4.99 for 1 gallon of gasoline. $5. It didn't happen in thin air, Richard. It happened because Israel's war criminal, Bibi Netanyahu, found an idiot in the White House who'd finally give him his little war in Iran that he has wanted for decades. And now the Strait of Hormuz is closed down, causing energy prices to rise, causing fertilizer prices to rise as our farmers are already getting crushed from Dear Leader's insane tariff scheme. And then there's this from Bridge Magazine's Rob French from about a week ago, talking about how farmers are getting decimated by the Trump economy. And thanks to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which is where a large portion of fertilizer is transported, Michigan farmers are facing more pain. According to Rob French's story there in Bridge, Michigan, quote, Jonathan Laporte, a farm economist with the Michigan State University Extension Service, says you need a lot of nitrogen or fertilizer to grow corn. With rising costs and flat or lower sale prices at harvest, Laporte said that farmers are now asking, can I still make money on this crop? And a recent Farm Bureau survey found that 48% of Midwest farmers can't afford all the fertilizer they need this year. Less fertilizer means fewer bushels of corn to come this fall. And almost 6 in 10 farmers said that their farm's financial outlook was getting worse. 6 in 10, according to that survey. The working class can't keep up with inflation, and farmers are getting decimated. Thanks to Trump's tariffs, Trump's and Israel's war in Iran, and thanks to the MAGA Republican so-called Big Beautiful Bill, or the MAGA murder budget, as I call it, which was nothing but a handout to the billionaire and Epstein class, the working class is getting punished. Now, here was dear leader Trump again talking to the press here this week. When asked if he really thought about the American people's financial situation when it came to the war in Iran.
What extent are Americans' financial situations motivating you to make a deal?
Not even a little bit. The only thing that matters when I'm talking about Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon.
You heard that. Dear leader said he doesn't think about Americans' financial situation while he and Bibi continue this illegal and unconstitutional war. Now I have to tell you, I believe him there, since he's never cared about the financial stability of the working class. When has he ever before? Never. And then you have MAGA House Speaker Mike Johnston saying that we really didn't understand the context of dear leader's statement. See, he's always playing chess while we're all playing checkers.
I don't know the context in which he made that comment, but I can tell you the president thinks about Americans' financial situations. I talk to him on average twice a day, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, and we talk about it constantly. He's laser focused on trying to resolve the conflict in Iran, because if we get the Strait of Hormuz, when we get the Strait of Hormuz reopened, that will alleviate a lot of pressure with gas prices and other things in the economy. Now,
what a joke. Mike Johnston claims to be a Christian, but that's not possible since he's up there lying for Trump each and every day and lying for his own political and financial power every single day. And what's worse is how Michigan MAGA Republican Congresswoman Lisa McClain is standing right next to him wearing that big, stupid, smug, I can get away with anything smile. You really think she cares about the people in the thumb region? Really? This is the same Lisa McClain who really didn't have much to say about a water main break affecting over 200,000 Michiganders in northern Oakland County, which, is her district. Now, she finally released some half-assed statement after being pressed by reporters, but that didn't surprise me at all that we didn't hear much from Lisa McClain. Now, I'm not personally blaming Lisa McClain for this water main break. After we're learning the pipe burst just after 50 years of service, it was supposed to last for some 100 years, but experts say that the type of pipe, I think it's called PCCP, but did not last as long as expected. And as Great Lakes Authority CEO Suzanne Coffey told the Detroit Free Press, she said the Great Lakes Water Authority has 80 miles of this PCCP in its 800-mile system. Just replacing all of it quickly, she says, is not economically feasible. It would cost $20 million per mile or $1.6 billion to replace it all. But beyond the potential pipe issues, 16% of the pipes in the authority systems are past their useful life, she said. And she says there has been an underinvestment in our aging infrastructure. Maybe, and I'm just spitballing here, but maybe we should have continued investing in this nation's infrastructure, in the nation's healthcare system, in our food and farming industries, while not monopolizing big farms. And also, maybe we should have continued investing in our own people here rather than wasting billions in Middle Eastern wars like this war in Iran. While the Pentagon says the cost of the war is around $29 billion, Iran War Cost Tracker says that the cost is really close to $80 billion. And I'll believe that number over anything that Pete Hegseth from the Department of War will give us. But still, dear leader Lisa McClain, every MAGA Michigan congressman, including John James, who's running for governor, is backing this war on Iran while cutting spending on our working class here. Meanwhile, somewhere between 177 and 355,000 Michigan families will lose their health care this year. Can someone please explain to me how that's winning? Can someone please explain to me how that is considered America first? You're listening to LOL.
Help helping push a strong progressive message from Kalkaska to Kalamazoo, from Monroe to Marquette, from Detroit to DeWitt, from Trenton to Traverse City. Okay, Pat, I think they get the idea. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Show archives are available wherever you're listening to the show. Left of Lansing is now on Patreon. You can check out a complete archive of the show and other stellar content Pat doesn't share on the show. Visit patreon.com/Left of Lansing. Become a member for free. And check out Left of Lansing on YouTube as well. Now, here's Pat Johnston.
leftoflansing@gmail.com is the best way to reach me. Follow us on YouTube and on the socials, and subscribe to us on Patreon, where I will be putting up a weekly web poll this week. No, unlike last week, I promise you I'll be doing one this week. More on that in a bit. I just need to give you this reminder, okay? If you accept AIPAC money, if you accept AIPAC donations, then guess what? You are part of the overall problem as to why the Trump regime got us stuck in his and Israel's war in Iran. AIPAC has way too much power. It buys politicians on both sides of the aisle, just as we witnessed this week as Democratic Senator John Fetterman became the 50th vote to block a war powers resolution from passing in the Senate. You see? AIPAC always seems to get its way, and this time it was a Democratic senator who voted to block a war powers resolution. John Fetterman was saying, let's don't stop Donald Trump from doing whatever he wants to do in Iran. Now, I say this because we got some new polling in Michigan's Democratic Senate primary race showing progressive Dr. Abdul El-Sayed opening up a 9-point lead over the Democratic establishment choice of Miss AIPAC herself, Congresswoman Haley Stevens, and he now holds a 10-point lead over State Senator Mallory McMorrow. Now, that poll is from Mitchell Research and Communications in East Lansing, and while the number showing Dr. Abdul pulling in 80% of the 18 to 44-year-old vote might seem a bit too much to believe. Trust me, I love to believe it, but I don't know, 80%? That seems a little high. I don't think, though, it's impossible to still conclude that Dr. Abdul's doing very well with Gen Z and with millennial voters. And then there's this. We got news this week that progressive Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib announced her support for progressive candidate and good friend of this show, William Lawrence, in Michigan's 7th Congressional District race. And that 7th District, of course, is part of Livingston, Oakland, and Ingham counties. Lansing is part of that district, which is sadly being held by MAGA Republican Congressman Tom Barrett. Now, Rashida Tlaib said in her endorsement statement of William Lawrence, quote, Will has been on the front lines in protecting our communities. He helped protect our unhoused neighbors against measures that would have violated our human rights. Will has proven to do the work without the title. I'm proud to endorse Will because he will take on political corruption so that we can win quality health care and affordable housing and put a stop to endless wars. And I have to tell you, I thought that was a good line there where Rashida Tlaib said, Will has proven to do the work without the title. That's the kind of commitment and authenticity that working class Michiganders are looking for in their candidates. Even if they don't agree 100% with those candidates, they see how much people like William Lawrence cares about their community, how much they're willing to stick up for many of those in their community, that they're not just talk, that they show up and they fight. I guess that's called being a progressive. And you know what? If that's what it's called, then I'm fine with it. Look, I've had some disagreements in the past with the City Pulse's Kyle Malin, which I've shared with you on the show here during the years, but I always still read his columns, and I always respected his columns and his takes because he follows Lansing politics and knows some of the inside games. Again, while I may disagree with some of his conclusions, there's no doubt that Kyle Malin knows what's happening in Lansing, which is why I was quite stunned this week when Kyle Malin wrote a column in the City Pulse where he admitted that the polling is showing that the progressive energy is real within the Michigan Democratic Party base. I've been saying that for a long time. I didn't feel like many in the Lansing media intelligentsia were getting it, but it seems like they might be starting to get it. Now, after sharing the Democratic Senate numbers from that Mitchell Research poll that I just talked about, showing that Dr. Abdul has a significant lead, Kyle Malin cautions that while those could be outlier numbers, the poll does show one undeniable fact. It shows where the passion lies in this race. He reminds us how Bernie Sanders won Michigan back in 2016 against Hillary Clinton, and judging from the enthusiastic crowd that we saw at Mumford High School in Detroit the other weekend when Bernie campaigned with Dr. Abdul, the enthusiasm is there. Okay, and I agree with that. I mean, because here's my question. Where is the enthusiasm for Haley Stevens? Where is it? I haven't seen Haley Stevens hold any kind of real uplifting and energetic rallies like the ones that we're seeing with Dr. Abdul. I haven't seen that from Haley Stevens. And I'll be fair, I've at least seen some for Mallory McMorrow, but I haven't really seen any enthusiasm for Haley Stevens whatsoever. Has she held rallies like the ones that Dr. Abdul has held for the working class, where he explains his popular progressive policies like Medicare for all or for ending the war in Iran? I haven't seen her do that. Haley Stevens doesn't have rallies like that because the working class doesn't believe in her. Perhaps it's also because of the millions of dollars that Haley Stevens is getting from AIPAC that she doesn't really have to talk to the people. I'll get back to that in a second. But back to Kyle Molin's column in the City Pulse. He then mentions William Lawrence's campaign and how an internal poll shows Lawrence getting 20% of the vote compared to his Democratic establishment and corporate-backed candidate, former Ambassador Bridget Brink's number of 14%, and then former Navy SEAL Matt Masdam is pulling in 10%. Again, Kyle Molin warns all of us that we can't really read too much into those numbers. However, he says, and I quote, like El-Sayed, William Lawrence's heightened visibility makes them believable. The guy is everywhere. How many Bridget Brink or Matt Masdam yard signs have you seen popping up in people's yards? For me, I can't think of a lot. I'm noticing Lawrence signs, I will say that. And while Brink's and Masdam's national consultants are digging into the other candidate's background and drip-dripping another local official's endorsement, William Lawrence is talking to real people about his campaign. That's what I've seen. At some point, I imagine McMorrow, Stevens, Brinks, and Masdam will empty their bank accounts on some late TV spends, and I'm sure that will move some numbers. But we're only 6 weeks away from absentee ballots getting mailed out. Look around. You can see where the energy in the Democratic Party is coming from. It's from progressives who already know who they're voting for. That was very good, and I will provide a link to Kyle Molin's article wherever you're listening, and I'll provide it up on the Patreon page as well, where I'll give some more comments in written form there. I agree with Kyle Molin, and I'm glad that he's catching on. The working class is frustrated, and the Democratic establishment figures who were there while Trump and MAGA took over the power levers of our government are now being singled out themselves as part of the problem. I mean, for years and years, we were told to accept the corporate establishment Democratic way of thinking, that they never do any wrong, just always go for Team Blue. But with that kind of thinking, and why do you believe Democratic leaders and the Democratic Party have such low approval numbers to coincide with Trump and MAGA Republicans? Because Democrats and independent voters, working class voters, are fed up with them too. And I like the part where Kyle Molin says that William Lawrence has been everywhere in his district, because you know what? To me, it shows. William Lawrence has been active in his community for a number of years, and he's made it a point to be a voice and a presence for the working class in his district that's battling big tech bro data centers. He wants to be a voice for the unhoused. He wants to be a strong voice for environmental justice, to be a strong progressive voice for our democracy and for our entire Constitution. And he wants to be a strong voice against ICE, while he also demands it to be abolished by Congress. And William Lawrence wants to be a strong anti-war, anti-AIPAC voice in this Congress. Let me play you a part of the interview that I had with William Lawrence about a month ago about why he decided to immediately announce his opposition to Trump and Israel's war in Iran when it started. Listen. You just immediately voiced your opposition to that war. Why did you feel like it was important to let voters know of your position on this war pretty quickly?
Well, because we've seen what's happened in the 45 days since that war started. It's been an utter disaster for the American people who are paying higher gas prices, for American global standing, for the people of Iran, not to mention Lebanon and across the region who are dealing with immense chaos as a result of the missiles flying in every direction. Saying no to war has been one of the core convictions animating my run from the beginning. Last summer, Pat, I was thinking about whether I should run, and it's a big commitment, obviously, and takes a lot of time, a lot of personal sacrifice for me and my family. And so I wasn't sure if I was going to do it or not. And I was at a wedding up north for a couple of good friends of mine. And I was under instructions from the groom not to inform him if we bombed Iran, because this was when the original strikes on the nuclear sites last summer were being rumored. He was trying to enjoy his wedding weekend. And, this was a very reasonable request. He wanted to enjoy his wedding weekend. Then the wedding happened. We're at the after party. I'm on the dance floor at like 10 p.m. And I take my phone out of my pocket, which is always a mistake. And I open it up and it had happened. We had bombed the Fordo nuclear site. And everyone was speculating about whether we were going to, enter World War III or Lord knows what. And I look around and I was surrounded by all these dancing millennials, with smooth brows because they hadn't heard the news yet. And I thought, my Lord, this is some sort of hell that we're living in. There's a lot of versions of hell, but this is one of them. And I thought about, back to the beginning of the war on terror and then the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. 25 years has been over half of my life since then. And this is where we are, beginning another chapter of the forever war in the Middle East and West Asia. This cannot be the life that we ought to be living. I thought to myself, I think I am going to run for Congress because somebody has to say that this is insanity. The United States cannot just assume that it can impose its will on any government or any people around the world just because we want to. We've got to recognize that it's a big planet, that there are a lot of powerful governments on the planet. It's not 1950 anymore. In 1950, we could dictate the terms. In 2026, we can't dictate the terms. And if we attempt to do so, it's going to result in the death of a lot of people, and it won't do anything to stop the decline of the United States. Actually, if we want to stop the decline of the United States on a world scale, we need to learn how to engage in diplomacy and collaboration to solve global problems, like the global economic recession, which is now happening because of the stupid war that we started in Iran. Or like climate change, which is still happening, is still causing immense negative economic impacts for farmers here in Michigan, and which is causing devastating human rights impacts around the world. And we can only stop with global collaboration with countries all over the world, including China, which is, the country that supposedly, we have to be able to beat in the next big war after this stupid war that we're currently in the process of losing in Iran. So it was important for me to speak out early and often against this war in Iran because war is not the answer to the problems of our time.
Now, to me, William Lawrence sounds like he's got moral clarity. That's the kind of authenticity and moral clarity the working class is looking for to represent them. Again, they may not agree with everything that William Lawrence stands for, but damn it, they know that he stands up for their communities and that he is a true America First candidate. And if William Lawrence is so far off the mark, if he's such a radical, why the hell did MAGA Republican Congressman Tom Barrett release a statement recently declaring that Congress should pass a war powers resolution or an authorization to use military force after July 30th? Yes, Tom Barrett couched his statement around fighting terrorism in Iran, conveniently leaving out how Israel is committing acts of terror on the Palestinian people in Gaza, and now the Lebanese, and also, of course, Iran. But he still released a statement demanding that Congress take control or at least take back some of its war powers. Now, something tells me that some internal polling is showing that's what the people of the 7th District wants, and that's why Tom Barrett released that statement. And see, that just goes to show that it's really those who back this war and who really want to give endless money and endless weapons to Israel, that they are the ones who are on the wrong side of the working class. They are the true radicals. Just as it's radical to force work requirements on those needing food benefits, as Tom Barrett, Lisa McClain, John James, and other MAGA Michigan Republicans supported as part of the big beautiful bill, or again, as I always have called it, and I think I'm right to call it this one, MAGA murder budget. These people are the radical ones who also want to work for and protect the Epstein class. They're fine lining up with their pedophile protecting president. They never want to stick up for the working class. The working class in Michigan is in a populist mood. And that poll showing Dr. Abdul El-Sayed leading by 9 points is of no surprise to this keen political observer, of course. Like Kyle Malin rightly noted, Dr. Abdul's the one with the ideas and the one with the energy. And for the life of me, I'll still never understand how Stevens and McMorrow said that ICE can only be reformed. It can't be abolished. and that we can tweak the already crooked, corrupt, and unsavable for-profit healthcare system that we have in this country. That system is broken. That system is awful. We've currently got Blue Cross and Blue Shield in Michigan duking it out with Michigan hospitals over what? Oh, that's right, profits. And if this fight continues between Blue Cross and Blue Shield and Michigan hospitals, it's going to cost so many Michiganders more money. This is not a sustainable system, and it's going to cost more lives and, of course, more money if we don't get to a Medicare for all system. The working class is in a populist mood for a reason. They don't feel like they're being heard by the corrupt leaders inside the Democratic Party, and especially they don't feel like they're being heard by the Trump regime and MAGA Republicans. And they've witnessed how we're throwing our money towards Israel and how our representatives seem to care more about their precious Israel than they do about the working class in this country. I mean, here's Haley Stevens announcing her continued support for Israel's right-wing and genocidal government in a recent video that she did for AIPAC. Here, listen.
Hi, everyone. It's Congresswoman Haley Stevens, and I want to communicate a message of standing for democracy and freedom, standing with our allies abroad, standing alongside the only democracy in the Middle East, and making sure that we continue to support an incredible relationship that yields trade, that yields economic growth, and that keeps our freedoms safe.
This war, everyone, is only going to get worse. Bibi Netanyahu told Barry Weiss's 60 Minutes on CBS that the war won't end until he says it's over. Well, at least that's what I heard. Stevens has accepted over $5 million in AIPAC money. And then there's this from Steve Neveling in the Detroit Metro Times this week. He writes, a mysterious political group using a media buying firm tied to pro-Israel spending is pouring more than $5.3 million into ads boosting U.S. Representative Haley Stevens in Michigan's Democratic primary for the U.S. Senate, raising fresh questions about whether Zionist donors are trying to shape the race from the shadows. The group, called the Center for Democratic Priorities, placed an ad buy in the Detroit, Grand Rapids, Flint, Lansing, and Traverse City media markets. The ads are scheduled to run from May 9th through May 31st, and the ad campaign comes days after AIPAC sent funding emails promoting Stevens and Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine while attacking Dr. Abdul El-Sayed and Graham Plattner, Collins' Democratic challenger. Wow. And guess what? That ad is now airing. Steve Neveling said, is now airing. And here, I'll play it for you. Just listen.
Congresswoman Haley Stevens is leading the fight to hold ICE accountable.
Haley Stevens of Michigan is calling for new federal oversight of immigration enforcement.
Stevens introduced the Hold ICE Accountable Act, which would create an independent special prosecutor to investigate alleged misconduct by the Department of Homeland Security and ICE.
This is about accountability for an agency that hasn't had any.
Tell Congress, support Haley Stevens' fight.
And remember, this is the same woman. Haley Stevens is the same woman who joined the so-called centrist Congresswoman Krista McDonald-Rivet up in Bay City and Detroit crypto Congressman Sri Thandahar in lauding support for ICE in a MAGA Republican resolution last year. They thanked ICE for their work. But Haley Stevens in that AIPAC ad says that she's going to take it to ICE. You see, AIPAC understands it can't just put out ads saying that Stevens is with AIPAC and Stevens is with Israel's genocidal government, since Americans have such a low opinion of Israel and AIPAC right now. So it creates these little front groups like Center for Democratic Priorities and puts out these gross lies about candidates that they want in office, like Haley Stevens. Now, as for State Senator Mallory McMorrow, her record is a little better than Stevens on this whole issue of Israel. But as Steve Neveling writes, McMorrow prepared a position paper for AIPAC that she says she never released publicly, and she attended an invite-only AIPAC fundraiser alongside, listen to this, Republican members of Michigan's congressional delegation, including U.S. Representative Jack Bergman, who confirmed meeting her there. Oh, wow. So look, whenever you're doing anything in agreement with Louisiana Jack Bergman, who spends more time down south in Louisiana than he ever does in the Upper Peninsula, where his district is really located, well, if you're really doing that, Mallory McMorrow, then you might be doing something wrong if you're hanging out with Jack Bergman. And same with this stupid attack that McMorrow's aide Liz Smith unleashed on Dr. Abdul, claiming that he claimed being a physician when he's really not. Now, of course, Dr. Abdul's communications director, Roxy Richner, told Ben Solis of Michigan Advance that Dr. El-Sayed has earned his medical doctorate from Columbia University and a doctorate in public health from Oxford University. That's 2 doctorates, she says. He has earned every right to be called doctor twice over. Of course he does. Those are some really, really impressive credentials. And even more, Dr. Abdul said it himself during a commencement address at U of M in 2019 that he is not a physician. Listen.
I'm actually often asked if I'm even a real doctor. That's up for debate, I guess. When I ran for governor, an enterprising journalist wrote an article. El-Sayed touts his doctor credentials, but he never practiced medicine. And it's true. I've never practiced medicine. That wasn't always the plan, though. After all, I don't think anyone plans to memorize thousands of PowerPoint slides, listen to hundreds of lectures at 3 times speed, or show up to pre-round at 5 a.m. because they don't intend to practice medicine.
So, listen, this is what drives so many people crazy when it comes to politicians. We're not talking about policies anymore. We're talking about semantics. We're talking about gotchas. Look, I thought I was fair to Mallory McMorrow in that deleted tweet story last month that broke. I mean, I said, so what? So she complained about Michigan weather. Whatever. We all complain about the weather. This week, it was 60 degrees, and then all of a sudden it's 44 degrees, and then it's 75 degrees. We all complain about the weather. So I didn't care. A make or break for me is how Mallory McMorrow and her people attacked Dr. Abdul for touring college campuses with popular progressive talker Hassan Piker. I mean, Hassan Piker has a loyal and younger audience, which could really help benefit Democrats. You know, in the long run, we really need to get younger voters fired up to vote for Democrats again. And I'll be darned, the pollster from that Mitchell polling firm showing Dr. Abdul leading by almost 10 points said that his numbers rose after all of those attacks against him and Hassan Piker by establishment corporate Democratic Party groups like Third Way. I'll be darned how that all worked out in his favor. Kyle Malin is on track with this one. The energy is with the progressive movement because we progressives, we are the ones not only talking about the problems facing working class Americans, but we're the ones bringing up actual solutions to those problems. Everyone, the old way is dead. The old way is over. The energy is with the progressive movement in Michigan. And why? Because Michigan voters are in a populist mood. You're listening to LOL.
You're listening to Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Left of Lansing is now on Patreon. You can check out a complete archive of the show and other stellar content Pat doesn't share on the show. Visit patreon.com/Left of Lansing. Become a member for free. But we won't be upset if you drop off a $5 donation when you visit. At the very least, it will help Pat pick up the bill the next time we meet up for lunch. I think I deserve it. And now you deserve more Left of Lansing.
I just want to thank some of you for your kind comments that you leave for me on the YouTube and via email. Hey, I even like the angry comments too because they really make my day. But no, thank you for all of the kind words that you leave me, and it makes me feel appreciated for everything that we try to do here on Left of Lansing. You know, I started this little project to help bring the progressive community in Michigan together and to help network the progressive community with others throughout the state who are doing the hard work each and every day to bring some real progressive change to all Michiganders. So thank you again. Look, I just need to say this before I move on to the last call. I don't agree with everything that Dr. Abdul El-Sayed says. I don't. Why? Because I don't agree 100% with any politician. See, for me, I have this idiotic thing that I own, which are called principles. And there's no way that I will ever agree 100% with any candidate. It's just not possible. For example, I like Graham Plattner, and I think he'd be a good senator for the state of Maine, certainly better than Susan Collins. But I don't agree with his stance on guns or on how to curb gun violence, yet on the whole, he's exactly what the working class needs in the Senate. And as for Dr. Abdul, I agree with his core platform, which is a strong working class platform, and it's also an America First platform. He's all for Medicare for all, of course. He's all about ending endless wars, but it doesn't mean that I agree with everything that he says. For example, as data scientist and self-described transit nerd for the Motor City, Amy Hemmeter posted on her Twitter account, she said that she finds Dr. Abdul's ideas of transit and transportation to be a little too heavy reliant on the auto industry because he's really talked about rebuilding bridges and roads. Well, okay, we keep doing that, but it's not sustainable. Now, I listened to Dr. Abdul on the Daily Detroit podcast, and yeah, I wish that he had a real robust pro-transit platform like he does with Medicare for All and getting money out of politics. Of course, there's only so much I guess he can do in the Senate when it comes to local transit, but he could still be a real voice in wanting to push Detroit, wanting to push Michigan into the future. However, I will say he talks about targeted tariffs, not doing what Dear Leader has done, these across-the-board arbitrary tariff schemes. But like Dr. Abdul, I'm not against targeted tariffs, but we need to get less cars on the road. And as we're seeing how we're at the whims of insane leaders right now, we need to find other ways to commute without paying for higher gas prices. We need a robust investment in transit. But with that being said, I don't normally use this type of language on the show. I really don't, but I will find it a deep fucking breath of fresh air to have people like Dr. Abdul and Graham Plattner in the U.S. Senate. Because then, everyone, we would have real working class voices in the Senate. And even more, we'd have younger voices in the Senate. Okay, I messed up last week, so I'll get it right this week. This week's Left of Lansing web poll will be posted, I promise. I apologize for not posting it last week. The poll question this week is, would you support an effort to expand the Supreme Court if Democrats regain control of Washington, D.C. in 2008? Your answers are yes, no, I don't know. I'm not sure who's going to vote. I don't know. I'm going to guess the majority of us would say yes. And in fact, that'd be a great question for Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, Mallory McMorrow, and Haley Stevens. Would they support an effort in the U.S. Senate, since they'll have that kind of power, to expand the Supreme Court if Democrats have control in Washington, D.C.? You can vote on Left of Lansing's YouTube page, on Twitter, or on Patreon. Time now for the Left of Lansing Last Call. All right, well, we've talked about data centers a lot during the last couple of years here on the show, and one part about billionaire tech bros and their data centers that has proven to be true is, well, they have found a way to bring the right and left together in opposing their data centers in their towns. But even more than that, it appears independents are opposing them as well. Why do I say that? Well, according to a Gallup poll, a majority of Americans are against the building of artificial intelligence data centers in their communities. Fox 2 in Detroit reports that 7 in 10 Americans, 7 in 10, oppose building artificial intelligence data centers in their local communities, including 48% who say they are strongly opposed. 48%. Just over a quarter are in favor, with only 7% expressing strong support. Are those the tech bros themselves? I've been hearing in the media for a little while that, well, the opposition is really from the far right and the far left. I don't think that would make up 7 in 10 Americans who oppose data centers in their communities, or even 48% who are strongly opposed. Then there's this. The March survey also asked Americans how concerned they are about the environmental impact of AI data centers. And nearly half, 46%, say they worry a great deal, and another 24% said that they care about it a fair amount, levels that closely track overall opposition to building such facilities. About half of opponents mention the heavy use of resources, including 18% who specifically cite water consumption and another 18% on energy use. An additional 16% raised concerns about pollution, including noise, as well as noise and water impacts. And I like the conclusion of the story that says, and I quote, "The strength of public opposition suggests new projects could face grassroots pushback and legal hurdles. It also points to data center development emerging as a potential issue in local and state elections, putting politicians who support these projects in a politically difficult position." Hey, we're seeing that in Michigan as progressive communities and conservative communities across the state are fighting back against these data centers. And I'll point to another reason that maybe wasn't cited in the poll, but we're hearing it in various places that oppose these data centers: transparency, or lack thereof. They see states like Michigan, where politicians made deals and passed bills granting the tech bros significant tax cuts and other corporate welfare measures, while local communities had barely any say. This is where our Democratic governor, Gretchen Whitmer, is disastrously wrong on this issue. Like everything else with Whitmer on the economic side of things, the governor believes in showering more and more money to corporations and also just shower them with lavish gifts and so-called incentives. And she wants Michigan, she says, to be on the forefront of AI, but at what cost to the state and what cost to the people who live in the state? Look, I get that AI is doing some good and will continue to do some good, but without any real safeguards or laws, there's nothing really regulating these guys. Everything is done behind closed doors. And of course, when you've got DTE and Consumers Energy pushing for more and more data centers across the state, since they'll be the ones providing the energy, that just makes Michiganders more and more suspicious, and for the right reasons. Even more, no one asked for this. Perhaps that's because these tech bros are adamantly against democracy. And I mean that, adamantly. They said it themselves, like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. So this is where the working class can make a stand. And here's the interesting part. I bet there are some who would be fine with AI data centers if there were more transparency behind them, and if we weren't the ones always footing the bill for these data centers. They're the ones alienating the people. And what did I just say in the last segment? Americans are in a populist mood.
You're listening to Left of Lansing. Music for the show and everything else on Left of Lansing is provided by Wanderbeats. To hear the latest project and complete music archives, check out Space Leopard on your favorite streaming site or subscribe to Space Leopard on YouTube. Now, back to our favorite progressive voice in Michigan. It's Pat Johnston.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Left of Lansing. So last week I said I was hoping to get a guest on that I've been hoping to have on the show here for the last month or so. Well, this week just didn't work out, but next week he said that he'd be ready to go. Joe Spalding, that's right, the famous Ottawa County progressive activist, one of the key people who helped get the independent redistricting amendment on the ballot last decade. And aren't we really happy about that? Joe Spalding will be on the show, and we'll talk about the latest that is happening on the west side of the state. Got some big races lining up there. We'll talk about the mop-up Michigan ballot initiative. Let's hope they get enough signatures so that way we can get money out of politics here in Michigan. And then Joe and I will talk about the state of the Democratic Party here in Michigan and the country. And I want to talk about that with Joe because we've shared some disagreements lately on our socials. And I thought, you know what? Rather than just share a few sentences going back and forth on Elon's site, let's talk about it here on the show. Because you know what? We're still on the same side, even though we may disagree on how to reach our ultimate goals. So I want to talk about that with Joe Spalding, who will join us next week. Let me know what you think of the show, and if there's anyone that you believe I should talk with on Michigan's premier progressive podcast, you can let me know again at leftoflansing@gmail.com. At the very least, everyone, with everything that is happening across the country and around the world, enjoy some of the spring weather that we're expected to receive here this weekend. Take whatever we can get, right? I may just have to have my first frozen strawberry margarita, homemade, by the way. Until next time, remember, take the battle to them. Thank you, Michigan.
You've been listening to Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Left of Lansing was produced by Pat Johnston, brainstormed by Pat Johnston, researched by Pat Johnston, written by Pat Johnston, edited by Pat Johnston, and yes, hosted by Pat Johnston. Technical assistance by Dr. Heather. Thanks to our good friend Rich for website assistance, and thanks to our good friend Kirsten for the awesome podcast logo. We thank Audio Boom for publishing the podcast every week. Visit leftoflansing.com for more news and information. Thanks again for listening to Michigan's premier progressive podcast, and we'll talk with you again next week.